Welcome everyone. Today we're looking at Mosul, the battle where seeing everything still wasn't enough to control anything. The end of this video, you'll understand why perfect visibility did not produce order, why tactical success failed to scale, and why modern armies can dominate a city without ever truly controlling it. Was mapped, monitored, and observed in real time, hovered constantly, never stopped, was hidden. Yet, the city refused to become manageable. Break down how Mosul was divided, planned, and attacked as a system that could be organized. Precision multiplied the problem instead of solving it. Areas were cleared without ever becoming stable. Why control slowly thinned until it stopped scaling altogether. Is not a story about lack of power, about the limits of control inside a city. If visibility was no longer the problem, what actually was? You find this kind of analysis useful? Like the video and consider subscribing. It helps a lot in creating more content like this. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Total Visibility. Mosul appeared at the perfect moment for modern warfare. 2016. Armies no longer fought blind. Tracked movement, hovered constantly above the city. Feeds streamed from multiple angles, updated in near real time. About Mosul was unknown. A distance, the battlefield looked transparent. Were mapped, were labeled, were cataloged, were identified. Could see almost everything. Level of visibility created confidence. The city could be observed continuously. It could be managed. Movement could be tracked. It could be predicted. Threats could be detected early. They could be neutralized before spreading. Looked like the opposite of Stalingrad. Chaos, uncertainty, clarity. Assumption was simple. Information would produce control. Previous urban battle had been defined by gaps, spots, promised none of that. Platforms reduced fog. Surveillance eliminated surprise. Weapons could be guided exactly where needed. City appeared readable. Visibility is not understanding. Activity does not explain behavior. Movement does not reveal structure. Knowing where something is does not tell you how it functions. Is the core mistake. Creates confidence, like watching every move in a game without knowing the rules. Was visible. It was not legible. Commanders saw were events. They could not see was how those pieces interacted inside the city as a system. Belief that awareness would translate into control shaped every decision that followed. Were built around observation. Assumed that more data would simplify the problem. Visibility became a trap. The more Mosul was observed, the more it became clear that seeing the city did not mean controlling this illusion, that total awareness could tame an urban battlefield, would collapse. Chapter 2. A City Built to be Managed. With visibility established, Mosul was framed as a problem of organization. The city was divided into sectors. Boundaries were drawn. Phases were sequenced. Objectives were assigned. On paper, Mosul became manageable. Urban space was treated as something that could be ordered. Neighborhoods were reduced to grids. Routes were categorized. Key buildings were labeled as nodes to be seized, secured, or neutralized. The city was converted into a system of compartments. This model was familiar. It had worked elsewhere. Clear. Hold. Advance. Repeat. Control was assumed to be cumulative. Each cleared sector would remain stable. Each phase would reduce the problem. Progress would move forward block by block until resistance collapsed under pressure. The plan depended on one central assumption: that urban space behaves like terrain, that once an area is secured, it remains secured, that boundaries hold, that influence does not easily cross lines, that control, once established, does not immediately decay. Mosul was approached as if it could be administered. Command structures reflected this belief. Timelines were precise. Responsibility was clearly assigned. Units were given clear sectors, clear tasks, and clear expectations. Maps showed clean lines of advance. Zones of control were neatly colored. The city appeared divisible. This produced confidence. If the city could be broken into parts, it could be reduced systematically. If each part could be controlled independently, the whole would follow. The problem seemed large, but not complex. This was the second mistake. Dividing space created order on maps, not control on the ground. What this model did not account for was interaction between sectors, between populations, between vertical and horizontal space, between cleared and uncleared zones. It assumed neighborhoods could be isolated from one another. That movement would remain predictable. That influence would not leak across boundaries. It assumed civilians could be separated from combatants. That cleared areas would remain inert. That control could be paused, resumed, and transferred without friction. But cities do not function as compartments. They function as networks. Movement does not respect sector lines. Influence does not stop at boundaries, and control does not remain where it is placed. A cleared street still connects to an uncleared one. A secured building still interacts with the structures around it. A population still moves, communicates, and adapts across zones. The city continued to function even as planners tried to freeze it into phases. The more Mosul was divided on maps, the more it resisted division in reality. What appeared orderly in planning would soon dissolve under contact. Not because the plan was careless, not because intelligence was lacking, not because forces were insufficient, but because the city did not behave like the system the plan required. Mosul was not built to be managed. It was built to be lived in, and that difference would matter. Chapter 3. Precision everywhere, control nowhere. If Mosul could not be simplified by planning alone, it would be shaped by force. Precision was everywhere. Airstrikes were guided by live feeds. Targets were verified repeatedly. Weapons struck specific rooms, specific vehicles, specific positions. This was not saturation fire. It was discrimination. Every strike was meant to reduce uncertainty, to remove resistance without destabilizing the environment, to make space safer, cleaner, and more controllable. At the tactical level, it worked. Individual threats were eliminated. Strong points were neutralized. Movements were disrupted. Nothing about the system failed mechanically. But something unexpected happened. Each precise action altered the environment in a way that could not be predicted. A destroyed building did not disappear. It collapsed. It reshaped surrounding space. It created new cover, new angles, new routes. A cleared position did not become inert. It became a transition zone, a boundary between controlled and uncontrolled space. Precision did not remove complexity. It redistributed it. The more accurately force was applied, the more fragmented the city became. Walls fell into irregular shapes. Streets narrowed or vanished. Interiors opened into one another. What had once been legible space became layered and unstable. Movement slowed. Visibility degraded. Navigation became uncertain. The city no longer behaved as a fixed environment. It reacted. Each strike solved a local problem while creating several new ones nearby. A cleared building exposed adjacent structures. A neutralized position shifted pressure elsewhere. An opened route became a vulnerability that had to be watched constantly. Control did not expand. It stretched. Firepower succeeded tactically, but it could not impose order. The assumption had been that precision would make the city simpler, that accuracy would reduce friction, that modern force could shape urban space without breaking it. Instead, precision accelerated fragmentation. The battlefield did not collapse, it multiplied. By this stage, Mosul Mosul was no longer just divided into sectors. It was divided into micro-environments, each behaving differently, each demanding constant attention. Commanders could see what was being hit. They could measure effects. They could count destroyed targets. What they could not do was predict what the city would become afterward. Precision had reached its limit, not because it failed to destroy, but because destruction was no longer the problem. Control was, and Mosul was beginning to show that force alone could not restore it. Chapter 4. Clearing without holding. As operations pushed deeper into Mosul, a pattern began to repeat. Areas were cleared, buildings were entered, resistance was removed, and then the force moved on. What remained did not stay controlled. Every cleared zone required constant presence. The moment units shifted forward, control weakened behind them. Space did not remain secure on its own. Control existed only where bodies remained. This created an immediate strain. To advance, forces had to thin themselves out. To hold, they had to stop moving. Both options carried risk. A cleared street still connected to uncleared streets. A secured building still opened onto contested structures. Movement across the city could not be sealed completely. Control leaked. Each advance created new edges. Each edge demanded observation. Each observation point demanded manpower. Progress did not reduce the problem. It expanded it. Clearing an area did not simplify the environment. It multiplied the number of places that needed to be watched. Units found themselves stretched across narrow corridors of control. Supply routes became fragile. Gaps opened between elements. A position considered safe at one moment could become exposed the next. Holding territory became more demanding than taking it. The assumption that cleared space would remain stable proved false. Mosul did not behave like terrain that could be secured and left behind. It behaved like a system that reactivated the moment pressure shifted. If this sounds familiar, it should. The same logic collapsed in Stalingrad, where clearing buildings never translated into lasting control. If you want to see how this pattern first broke a modern army, there's a full breakdown linked here. The city absorbed movement without yielding permanence. What planners had imagined as a sequence, clear, hold, advance, collapsed into a dilemma. Advance without holding, and lose control behind you. Hold without advancing, and exhaust the force. There was no stable balance. By this stage, progress stopped accumulating. Gains became temporary. Stability became local and fragile. The city did not need to retake ground actively. It only needed to wait. Mosul was no longer being reduced. It was being endured. And endurance is not control. Chapter 5. Vertical and Human Complexity. As horizontal control weakened, the battle reorganized itself. Upward, downward, inward. Mosul stopped behaving like a surface. It became a volume. Buildings were no longer just obstacles. They became systems of layers. Basements, tunnels, stairwells, rooftops, collapsed floors. Control could not be projected across space. It had to be asserted vertically, level by level. A unit might control a room, but not the hallway outside it. A floor, but not the one above. A building, but not the structures connected to it. Every cleared space opened multiple new directions of threat. Supporting fire became difficult to apply. Precision strikes risked collapsing contested structures. Artillery and air power could not easily shape interiors without creating new hazards. Firepower lost its ability to dominate space. At the same time, human complexity intensified the problem. Civilians moved through the city continuously. Displaced families crossed zones, assumed to be secure. Combatants blended into the population. Boundaries between hostile and non-hostile space dissolved. The city could not be simplified without destroying what it was meant to protect. Every decision carried trade-offs. Moved too aggressively, and civilian harm increased. Moved too cautiously, and resistance adapted. The presence of civilians was not incidental. It was structural. Human movement interfered with prediction. Behavior could not be modeled reliably. Patterns shifted constantly. The city refused to become a closed system. Vertical complexity multiplied tactical uncertainty. Human complexity prevented operational clarity. Together, they broke the assumption that control could be imposed cleanly. Mosul was no longer a battlefield shaped by force. It was an environment shaping the force inside it. The city dictated tempo. The city dictated limits. By this stage, control was no longer something to be achieved. It was something to be negotiated moment by moment. And every negotiation favored the environment over the plan. Chapter 6. Tactical Success, Strategic Stagnation. At the tactical level, Mosul worked. Units adapted. Small teams learned the terrain. Junior leaders made effective decisions under pressure. Contacts were handled. Positions were taken. Threats were eliminated. Locally, the system functioned. But those successes did not accumulate. Each tactical gain remained isolated. A building secured did not stabilize the block. A block cleared did not stabilize the district. A district reduced did not simplify the city. Success stopped propagating. The mechanisms that normally transform local victories into broader control failed to engage. Momentum could not be sustained. Progress did not compound. The larger the operation became, the weaker control grew. Command structures depended on continuity of space. Mosul denied that continuity. Coordination lagged. Information arrived late. Decisions were made with partial context. What worked at the squad level lost effectiveness at the company level. What worked at the company level broke down at the brigade level. The system was operating beyond its scaling limits. More forces did not solve the problem. More precision did not clarify it. More information did not organize it. Every additional element increased friction. Effort rose. Returns diminished. The battle reached a state where action was constant but direction was unclear. Commanders could influence events locally, but they could not shape the battle as a whole. Control existed only in fragments. Mosul demonstrated a critical truth. A system can succeed everywhere and still fail overall. Not because it is weak, but because it cannot scale under the conditions imposed by the city. This was not defeat. It was stagnation. A state where movement continued, fighting persisted, and effort never stopped, yet nothing resolved. Mosul was no longer a battle moving toward an outcome. It was a system consuming itself, one tactical success at a time. Chapter 7. The City that Absorbed Control. By the end of the battle, Mosul had revealed its limit, not a limit of firepower, not a limit of intelligence, not a limit of training or courage, a limit of control. The city did not defeat the force confronting it. It absorbed it. Every attempt to impose order required constant presence. Every gain demanded continuous effort. The moment pressure shifted, control dissolved. There was no stable end state. Mosul was not conquered in the traditional sense. It was exhausted into submission. Control did not collapse suddenly. It thinned. It fragmented. It stopped scaling. What remained was presence without permanence. Action without accumulation. Effort without resolution. The systems designed to manage modern warfare continued to function. They detected. They targeted. They responded. What they could not do was turn activity into order. Mosul demonstrated that visibility does not equal understanding, that precision does not guarantee control, that success at small scales does not automatically translate upward. The city functioned as an anti-system. It punished rigidity. It dissolved continuity. It converted structure into friction. This was not a failure of doctrine in isolation. It was a structural condition. Urban environments do not collapse under pressure. They redistribute it. And when control cannot scale, victory becomes a matter of endurance rather than decision. Mosul did not end when the fighting stopped. It ended when one side could no longer sustain the constant effort required to keep control from slipping away. That is the limit Mosul exposed, not of power, but of organization.